If you need to calculate the carbon emissions from the amount of gas you use and use them in your report, SECR, ESOS, TCFD, science-based targets, whatever it's going to be, it is pretty straightforward. There's one thing I think you need to just sort of bear in mind and consider, but it's pretty straightforward. Let's look at how we do it. If you need to figure out the carbon emissions from your gas use, it's pretty straightforward. There's one little thing I'll tell you a bit later on that you got to sort of bear in mind, but it's pretty straightforward. So there's three ways really of getting the data into the system you're using. The first is have a look at the bills, print the bills off, and just type the information from the bills into whatever platform you're using. Good news about that is you pretty always get a gas bill, don't you, once a month, and you just rekey it in. Bad news is you've got to print the things off, or at least have them on PDF on screen, and you get transposition errors, and sometimes you end up with pages and pages and pages of bills, and you've got to wade through them and find the right bit of information. The second way of getting it in is most utility companies these days will have a portal that you can just dial into, download a CSV of your gas use, and then just upload that to your system. That's really very straightforward as well. We do that a lot in my company. The last way is that if you've got one of the more modern software packages, it generally has an electronic link in it to the utility company. And as long as you go through the faff of setting your meter up, and that means finding the meter serial number, and on gas meters that's called an MPRN, meter point reference number. Type the MPRN in, it's normally about a few digits, 8 or 10 digits, something like that long. Type that in, test it all out, and then it will just suck the information in. That's the easiest way of doing it. And the benefit, by the way, is you don't have to do anything. Every month it just sucks the new information in. Job's a good one, okay? The gotcha, and there is a gotcha with this, is that if you've got a gas meter of the type I typically see installed in companies, they measure the volume of gas flow, okay? So they measure how much gas has passed through them and then therefore been consumed in your boiler. They don't know what's in the gas, okay? And the glib answer is, well, it's gas, isn't it? Well, I know gas is gas, but what's in the gas? It changes. It's a mix of propane, butane, I don't know whether there's any pentane in there, and if you go back to chemistry days, that's the number of kind of links they've got in all the molecules, etc. But the amount of heat you get out of mixing those different gases, it varies. So the proportion of those gases, of the butane, pentane, methane, I think maybe even be some hydrogen in there these days as well. But the mix of those gases, the meter doesn't know about them. Okay, so it can tell you, for example, you use, I don't know, for example, 600 cubic meters, but it doesn't know how many kilowatt hours were in there, and therefore, what the carbon emissions of that burning was. So you have to kind of rely on the fact that the utility company does know what's in the gas. And if you look on your bill, there's sometimes there's a kind of calorific value or a correction factor that says normally our gas, for example, is 100% of some arbitrary sort of unit that they've selected, 100% mix. But do you know what, this month is just not as good, it's 98%, or this month it's slightly better, it burns slightly hotter, so it's 105%. And this calorific factor, this correction factor, you need to apply that to the amount of gas you've used to figure out the kilowatt hours content of your gas. And from your kilowatt hour content of gas, you can then figure out what the carbon emissions were. And there's carbon tables that will allow you to do that. Okay, so carbon factors, which we covered in one of the earlier videos. So that's the way you do it. You find your volume, look at the correction factor, find the kilowatt hour value, and then multiply that by the carbon factor. Sometimes that does it on the bill for you, so you just read the kilowatt hour, and if you've got that on your bill, happy days, nice and easy, that's the figure you need. If you don't have an electronic link, if you're retyping the information, etc., then you're going to hit, believe me, you're going to hit the problem that you're going to have missing data. Typically you've got a month missing here and a month missing there or something like that. And the question is what you do about that. Well, to start with, you must remember that all gas readings, if you haven't got a smart meter, are going to be estimates. So don't worry too much. You are missing some, yes, here and here. But what I'm going to say next is you estimate the data. Well, if you didn't do it, the utility company just does it anyway. Because if the utility company takes a reading, say from your meter twice a year, or you dial it in once a quarter, then all the other readings between that, you've got no idea. They're just estimates, okay? If you haven't got a smart meter, they're just estimating. So that's what we're going to do too. And if you've got the odd data gap here, there and everywhere, just use estimation, averages or something like that to fill in the data gaps. And again, some software packages will do that for you, okay? How much is acceptable in terms of missing data? Broadly speaking, 10% is the number we go for in net zero. So if you've got 90% of the data, we're happy days, yeah? And that's 90% not of the number of data points, but 90% of the energy that you think you've used. And if you've only got one gas meter, well, they're kind of the same thing. But if you've got, for example, a massive boiler over there and a tiny boiler down here, obviously, having more gaps in the data of the smaller boiler is going to be just as acceptable as having fewer gaps in the larger boiler, okay? So, but 1 in 10 or 90% is the rule of thumb. If you've got more than 10%, so say for example you've only got half the data, consider just estimating and making a note, okay? Or better still, go back to the utility company and say, look, I'm trying to do this, can you give me access to the online portal to get the information out, okay? And that's what we do. We typically say, look, hang on a second, let's go and have another go at getting the data, basically. And sometimes that takes a few days for them to enable the right thing on the portal. Sometimes it's pretty immediate. Final thought for you, if you haven't got a smart meter fitted to your gas, and they're not as common as they are for electricity meters, but if you haven't got a smart meter on your gas, consider fitting one, okay? It just makes all of your job much easier. The data's more accurate and it's more immediate. So say, for example, you run a program where you're looking to turn the boiler off more, to switch more to sort of non-carbon fossil-based fuel heating sources. So say you've got like some solar panels being installed with a new heating system, or you're going to move to some sort of high efficiency electric heating system. If you do that, you can see what your gas use is without relying on those estimates that I said earlier. And without a smart meter, you're not going to know. I hope that was useful. If it was, please consider having a look at my book, Net Zero for Business. It's available on Amazon. And if it is useful to you and like the book and you want to give it a good review, I'll love you forever and a day. All right. Thanks a bunch. See you next time.